And thanks for the invitation, Anya and Brian, to speak today. I hope I can do Sharon justice. She really wanted to be here today, but unfortunately she's over in the UK. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, when my presentation appears, a little bit about... I've got to stand here. Okay. Right. My chiseled features. Yeah. So yeah, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the conservation work that we've been doing in the Burren over the last 20 years. Lots of people are involved in this, including my colleague Neil in the back. Just going back to it, my day job is with the Burren programme, and I also am a volunteer with the Burren Bio Trust. And again, we've got Karen here from the Burren Bio Trust, formerly of. So there you go, Karen. So yeah, the story I have to tell is, it's a really interesting one, I think, and it's hopefully an inspiring one. And I hope it's relevant to yourselves. I know very little about invertebrates, I have to confess. My focus is more on working with the management and the conservation side of things. But I hope this is relevant, and I'd like to thank all those people who are involved in the creation of this production. So, the Burren, this is the national park at the heart of the Burren, but most of the Burren is really privately owned land, farmland. A little bit of commonage, a little bit of public land, but by and large it's privately owned farmland. Our definition would be about 72,000 hectares, slightly larger than what was presented maybe yesterday, because we go a bit into Galway and a bit down towards Lisdoonvarna as well. About 30,000 of Annex 1 habitat is designated in the Burren, which is quite a significant area. Of course, it's famous for its biodiversity. It's, you know, I think it's Webb and Skinnell described it as a botanical metropolis. With plants from the Arctic, from alpine Mediterranean regions as well. But as we heard yesterday, it's got this amazing invertebrate fauna as well, which is really special. I have lots of pictures. I don't know what half of them are, to be honest with you. I know the one on the top left, because I was in the Burren about 10 years, and Sharon kept saying to me about the Burren Green over in Ballyvaughan. And I was so frustrated I could never find it. It must have been out at the right time of the night. But one morning, Sunday morning at home, my son Oscar, who's about 5, came in with this thing cupped in his hand, saying, "What's this, Dad?" And it was a Burren Green. So the picture there is from the front of the house. So I was usurped by my 5-year-old son. So 15 years later, I still haven't spoken to him. He hasn't apologised. But lots of really beautiful creatures. And great education. I love the little burnet moths, because as an educational invertebrate, they're unsurpassed, because basically you can pick them up and show them off, and people can look at this amazing creature in broad daylight. So lots of interesting species, and we're blessed, we really are blessed. I'm particularly blessed to live in the East Burren, which is, as we've learned yesterday, a hotspot for all these wonderful creatures. But the Burren is also a farmed landscape. We have this wonderful biodiversity, but we also have this wonderful history of farming. And the legacy that's left, this is a satellite imagery, infrared, showing the legacy of 6,000 years of human activity. And I just wanted to make the point that we all look at the Burren with different perspectives. You look on it from the perspective of maybe conservation and invertebrates. Farmers look upon it from the perspective of food production. Archaeologists are obsessed, rightly so, with the incredible archaeological legacy. We have geologists as well. And we've many, many other interest groups, all of whom want something from the Burren, who have a particular interest in the Burren. And that does make the management challenge particularly difficult to try and accommodate all those perspectives. Because I dare to say, but within this room, you probably all would have different objectives for a single field in the Burren. What about a whole landscape? And maybe 1,000 farm families, each one of whom have a different history on the land and a different set of management prescriptions and a different cultural attitude toward the land as well. So it's quite complicated. But that's the beauty of the Burren. I wouldn't change it for a minute. It's fabulous. The issue, as Ashley described so well in her talk, was that the balance is being lost in a lot of these landscapes. We have intensification or abandonment by and large. So here's a typical piece of land in the Burren. Too much farming, as happened particularly in the 80s and the 90s. You start to lose a lot of your species. It causes issues with water. The feeding of silage is a real source of point pollution in the Burren, and huge damage being done. So that's one extreme, which is kind of limited, but is significant in the Burren. The other extreme is where you have less and less farming, because really the viability of farming this type of land anymore, it just isn't there, because it's not efficient to farm this landscape. And when there's plenty of off-farm work in Limerick and Galway and Shannon, you're inclined to farm it less and less, focus more on the greenland and your slatted house. So with less grazing, you'll get scrub encroachment and a threat not just to the biodiversity, but also to the archaeology and to the farm farming potential of the landscape and to tourism and recreation and things like that. So what we're trying to do in the Burren, all of us for many years now, is to try and restore the balance. We want to keep the Burren as diverse as it currently is. I suppose the big trend is towards undergrazing and not abandonment per se, but less and less grazing. So here's the Burren, Lawrence photograph from 1900, and here's the same picture in 2000. I went back 100 years later. That was my 300th birthday to take this picture. They invented cameras by then, thankfully. But you can see the change in the landscape, which is quite dramatic, particularly in the South Burren. From here south, it's basically lost, I think, to agriculture, a lot of it now. But that's a big change. So what have we done? We all recognize the amazing wonder of the Burren from all these perspectives. So we did introduce designations, SACs, archaeological complexes, all these different things, particularly in the mid-90s. And that was really important in terms of preventing the damage, the reclamation of beautiful pavements in the SAC areas. It's still happening out width of the SACs, unfortunately, and that's a big problem. But it really did cause a division between farmers and the authorities, if you like. And I think we have lots of our colleagues from national parks here who will attest to that. Farmers felt very bitter about that their freedom to farm was being taken from them. We did respond with the carrot then in terms of national agri-environmental schemes, but to be honest with you, they're very important as a source of income, but they're very much top-down. So initially the Burren farmers are told no more outwintering. So 6,000 years of farming tradition out the window. Then they were brought to their senses, but they moved to the extreme of no summer grazing. So if you had a cow on your field during summertime, you got 2,000 or 3,000 euros worth of a fine. So very awkward, very, I suppose, disrespectful of farmers' unique traditions and so on. So it wasn't really working. Farmers really did like the money, but the environmental impact really wasn't what we'd hoped. So about 20 years ago, there was a kind of a push toward for a new, inclusive, kind of targeted approach to the conservation of the Burren, and that's where we came in. So basically what we're saying is for 6,000 years, you have this farming culture in the Burren, which is all about producing food and selling the excess food, obviously. But this is what it's always been about. So it's really deep in the psyche of Burren farmers to produce food. And now, in the 21st century, we're saying, well as the food, we want you to manage the land in such a way as to deliver all these wonderful ecosystem services. Clean water, landscape features, biodiversity, and so on. And that's quite a mind shift and a big cultural shift as well for farmers. And it hasn't been easy to do it, but I think we've had some success over the years. So we've been at this since the National Parks and Wildlife Service sponsored the Burren Life project in 2005. That was based in itself on some PhD research in 1999 to 2001 that I did myself. And then we moved on to the Burren Farm Conservation Programme in 2010. 2015 became the Burren Programme. And right now, my colleagues and I are working on something called Acres, which is a national programme, which is basically the continuation of the Burren programme into the future, but with big differences. So basically, we have a story that spans over 20 years, I guess, if you take in the research piece. So if nothing else, we've got a lot of stories to share, a lot of lessons that we can share with you, and I think they're really valuable lessons. So we've been basically trying to direct farmers toward a new vision for farming. And what I wanted to present to you in the next 10 minutes is kind of what we figure works, what we need to happen, not just in the Burren but elsewhere, if we're interested in conservation and we're talking about farmland. And it's not just about the money, but the money is really important. Farming is a business. You know, if you get more money for producing food and biodiversity, you're going to produce more food at the cost of biodiversity. So pocket is really important. And we've created a really unique system of rewarding farmers for the production of ecosystem service or the delivery of these services. But don't make the mistake thinking you give farmers money, you tell them what to do and close the door, it's all sorted out. It's not like that. You also have to give them support. So how do you farm for nature? How do you farm in a way that suits butterflies or rare plant communities or water quality or climate now is the new one. So how do you do it? What kind of feeding systems, grazing systems, breeds, what type of time and type of grazing system do you want? So that's really important. We have a local office about 5 minutes drive from here, right in the middle of the Burren, where the door is always open to farmers who want to know about that. So that's really important. And the third thing I'm always on about is the heart. You know, you can throw money at a problem and you can give advice, but actually, until people really are committed to it, you'll never really get the tipping point of success that we want. All of us, when we go to work, want to believe in what we do and the importance of doing it. So we've got to get farmers on board. Many of them are, but we've got to get farmers on board with the conservation agenda, because right now the situation isn't good between the farming and environmental community, you could say. So I'm going to give you 9 slides, 3 from the pocket, the head and the heart. This one, I think, is probably the most important slide I wanted to share with you. About 20 years ago, 15 years ago, Sharon and ourselves in the programme developed a scoring system, basically whereby every year during summertime, we give each field in the Burren a score between 0 and 10 based on its environmental health. So if a farmer's wrecking a field, 0 out of 10. If a farmer isn't grazing at all, 4 out of 10. If a farmer's doing everything right, protecting the water, grazing at the right time, doing everything properly, 10 out of 10. So this is really interesting because it, first of all, allows farmers the total freedom to farm. Nobody's telling them what to do anymore. We're telling them what we'll pay for, but it's entirely up to them to manage, and that's huge for farmers, the freedom. Secondly, we get feedback. We get lots of data showing the condition of each field each year over time, so we can track the impact of a programme. And thirdly, we're giving value for money, so we're not paying for this crap anymore. But this has a value. This has a value for some invertebrates, but the farmer doesn't have to put much effort in, so we're not going to pay. So what we're saying is we've created a kind of an ideal scenario of 10 out of 10, but we don't expect every farmer to deliver that. We wouldn't want that to happen, because that would make the Burren uniform. What we're trying to do with the scoring system is keep the Burren complex, keep the management complex, keep the outcomes diverse, because that, I think, is something that can accommodate everybody's needs within the Burren. It's very simple. Here's Neil, who does a lot of the scoring. So we have advisors doing the scoring, and we check the scores then on 20–30% of farms every year using a simple scorecard. I can go through the detail of it later. That scorecard then, the scores are translated into a payment for the farmer based on certain banding systems. But basically, the higher the score, the more money you get. So we have a premium rate for a score of 10, slightly less for 9, and then a good drop down 8, 7, 6, 5, nothing for less than that. So it's quite simple, and it's really good value. We spend about €1 million a year on 300 plus farmers across the Burren to manage Ireland's most wonderful and diverse landscape. €3,400 is the average payment, but it ranges from 82 to 10,000. One guy gets 10,000. He's about 400 hectares of immaculately managed Burren habitat, so it's a good deal. The payments aren't extravagant, as this slide shows. It's quite well spread. So it's basically paying farmers for ecosystem services. And as we say to the farmers, it's like bringing your cow to Kilfenore Mart. The better the condition, the more money you're going to get. So that's the incentive right there. So if your scores are poor, it might be because your water sources are polluted. So we'll give you some support funding then to maybe put in water troughs to stop the pollution. If the place is undergrazed, we'll give you some support to restore the walls and put in water troughs so that you can get the grazing targeted again. And if you've got an issue with scrub encroaching or an issue with access through scrub, we'll give you some funding to remove that scrub in a targeted way. So basically, these are support actions to help the farmers drive up the scores on their fields. So we're not telling them what to do anymore. We're again saying, this is what we'll pay for. And the farmer thinks, well, this is what I need to do to get that. And then we give them funding to support that. So it's very enabling to the farmer. So it works out something like this, the action. So we give a certain price for a scrub job, mark it out on the map. The farmer or contractors do it. And when it's done, he gets paid that amount of money. If the farmer doesn't want to do it, he can opt out as well. So it's very much up to the farmer. And this is the kind of work we've been doing over the last number of years, removing scrub, wall repair, water installation, access tracks, fencing, gates, feed equipment, but trying to do it in a way that respects the integrity of the landscape and the needs of the farmer at the same time. The third economic opportunity, because we have to make this attractive, is rewarding farmers for delivery of services, conservation services, be it teams of people removing scrub, be it teams repairing walls, be it the guy here making Burren gates, which have gone in across the Burren over the last number of years, farmers leading walks, so the whole educational type of thing. So the work that we've done in the Burren programme is estimated to support about 20 local jobs each year within the Burren. That's from an external evaluation. So conservation can pay. So as well as getting paid for your food and for your environmental outcomes, you can also get some money from actually delivering these services to the community. So that worked quite well. So economically, we can now say to farmers, you know, by not reseeding that piece of land, we can pay for the species-rich habitat, we can support you in other ways as well. So it's a good financial option now for farmers. We've leveled the playing field. Very quickly, you have to have advice and support. So we do a lot of training sessions with our farmers in the field, in the classroom, at our local office just here in Carron. We also do videos. So for instance, 2 weeks ago we did a video about grazing millennia. Millennia is a big problem on some grasslands. You can only really graze it in June, July-ish. So we just sent a video out by WhatsApp to our farmers saying, now's the time to hit your millennia, get your cattle in there, and so on and so forth. So training videos as well. A lot of the solutions we've come up with, so this unbelievably toxic issue of silage feeding, which was rampant in the Burren in the 90s and the 2000s, we've managed to pretty much eliminate on 95% of farms by scoring that as 0, but also by coming up with an alternative feeding system based on an Irish-produced feed ration, which is just fed on the ground, gives the cattle the minerals and nutrients and allows them to forage the way we want. And that was a solution that was proposed by farmers, was tested by farmers, and was demonstrated by farmers. So this idea of co-creating gives farmers a big stake in the process. Likewise, horses make outstanding conservation grazers, as we found on some farms. And the old technologies around water harvesting on remote locations, we've revisited that using solar and wind, and you know this nice solution up here with the sheet of galvanized and the trough. So there's really nice ideas, both at small and large scale, co-created with the farmers. And we were big believers in the idea of peer learning. So farmers showing other farmers what they've done and how it works. And we've taken that to a national level with a little initiative called Farming for Nature. And we've a new project called The Horse's Mouth, where we give farmers some funding to go to other farms to tell those farmers, this is what I've done with my hedgerows, and this is where I put my pond in. So it's that kind of peer-to-peer learning. Because in the countryside, it's not just the message, it's the messenger as well. The messenger has to have credibility to the farmer. Finally, I just wanted to go through something which is often neglected, and I think this is a big reason why a lot of our agri-environmental schemes haven't worked, is that people just aren't buying into them. I think they see them as soft money, a lot of farmers, but we need them to see something more than that. So we've invested a lot through the Burren Trust, the local charity, in the future guardians of the land, so the farmers' sons and daughters and the other local residents. So for over 20 years now, we've been running programs in the Burren like this one called Vio, and about 2,500 Burren kids have come through that course and have graduated as Burren experts. So it's not us anymore, it's them, they're the new experts. So reinvesting in the community, and we have a new program called Heritage Keepers, which Karen has been involved in delivering on our behalf. We have a lot of monthly walks and talks. So, you know, Jesmond has been so generous over the years in hosting or giving a lot of talks for us and walks. And that's an amazing way to bring the community into the ecology of the Burren, because not enough people know about what you guys are talking about yesterday. People in the Burren should know that information. That should be the first source of sharing that information. Not too technically, mind you, but in a way that engages the community. So we've had little tea talks in Tubber Hall over the last 10 years, packed to hear about butterflies, to hear about archaeology, to hear about different elements of our landscape, be they birds or be they geological features. And that's really important in terms of making heritage okay and making an interest in heritage okay and acceptable within the community. And finally, we've had a wonderful festival every year called the Burren Winters Festival, where we basically highlight the importance, as Ashley said, of the grazing animal and the whole tradition of grazing. Because in the Burren, most of the land here is grazed in wintertime. So every year we have a farmer who brings his or her herd up onto the mountain and the community come along. And I love this picture because you can see the cattle going up and you can follow the line of people all the way back almost to Carron village. There's about 1,000 people herding 30 cattle up. And don't tell me farming isn't labour intensive. But that's a great way as well to give publicity and give ownership of the conservation of the Burren back to the community, to the farming community. Last couple of slides. Does it work? Like, the nice thing about the result-based is we can track our scores year on year. So in 2010, when we started the result-based programme, the average score across our farmers in the Burren would be about 6.8. And every year, bar the split between cap years, it's been on the increase. Very slight gradual increases. So some farmers going down, some farmers staying put, some farmers improving. But in general, the trend is upward. And that really legitimately means the Burren is in better condition than it was 20 years ago, or 12 years ago now, since we started this within the project farms. And I should say, we have about 70% of the Burren under management at the moment. So it's quite a significant area of land. We can put a figure on that, but really, before I put a figure on it, that means going from situations like this to situations like that. It really does mean legitimate improvements. This is an old silage feeding site, which is, being rehabilitated over time. We can put a value to ACOM Consultants figured that was worth about 33 million euros worth of landscape and biodiversity improvements since 2010, at least. That's presuming that without the Burren programme, you'd have a level line, but in reality, without the Burren programme, I suspect you'd be in decline, so 33 million is an underestimate of anything. And the nice thing about it is that it's not just limited to the Burren, but in the previous CAP in 2016, the whole notion of a locally targeted approach, often involving a result-based payment, was adopted across many parts of the country, including for the protection of the hen harrier and freshwater pearl mussel and so on. And it was a big success to the extent that now under the current CAP, there's about 150 million euros a year allocated to these result-based programmes across most of the high nature value farmland in Ireland. Now, we have big issues with how it's been presented at the moment and big concerns about its efficacy. And at this point, this is where Sharon will start cursing and blinding and effing. So probably good she's not here. So it's challenging when you scale. So we have some concerns about how things are going, but we'll hopefully have a good scheme at the end of it for the next round, because this is really important stuff. So conclusions, as I come up to my time, we really feel and have always felt that farmers are actually a very powerful and underused resource in terms of conservation management, particularly in landscapes like the Burren and other HNV areas. And I say that having worked with them for 20 years, and they break your heart sometimes, but by and large, I think they really want to do the right thing, and they really do respect the legacy that they've been left to look after by previous generations. But I think to mobilise this resource, we need to take this pocket, head, heart approach. And the support that we provide, we need locally targeted. The Burren is different from Connemara and from Kerry, so we have to recognise that, have a local approach. Integrated, so it's very confusing now for farmers. Should I be letting trees grow for carbon or cutting them down so that there's a mosaic of habitats, or what's the right thing to do? It's quite confusing. The type of grazing system that suits the archaeology mightn't be the one that suits the biodiversity, for instance. It is a confusing space, I find myself. We feel that the results should be, or the payment should be result-based. So rather than a flat rate payment for certain actions that you're told to do, pay a farmer who delivers, who puts the effort in and who delivers the outcome. Is really important. And finally, respect farmers' values. So farmers, freedom to farm is a huge thing. Don't tell them what to do. You have to allow them to adapt and innovate to suit their farm needs. Get rid of the paperwork. We've always tried to get rid of the paperwork so the farmer doesn't have to worry about that. Use positive language, and language that they can understand. We tend to use terms quite a lot, and that's very off-putting. And to celebrate what's wonderful about these landscapes rather than think, it's a burden. I live in the Burren, and it's a burden to live here because of all the rules and regulations. So that's it. That's my conclusion, and thanks very much. I have about 5 of these books. If anybody's particularly interested in result-based payments, I'll come up to me afterwards and I'll give them to you. Thanks.
Great. We have time maybe for one quick question. Is there? Can I just go? Conor hasn't spoken yet. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Hi, I'm really interested in the Acres programme as well, about how you think the best way to approach farmers who maybe aren't involved in that programme yet, how to best kind of present it to them, and like what do you think is going to be a main challenge in getting other farmers, basically expanding that project to other farmers who maybe haven't been involved with it at the present, stuff like that. What's the kind of main roadblocks you see in that kind of
I think there's plenty of roadblocks, including the fact that it's a Department of Agriculture scheme, and there's probably too many rules and regulations for our liking. But I think it is more of an opportunity to exercise your freedom and to pursue an incentive. And I think farmers really respond to those two things well. They like an incentive, a challenge, and a reason to innovate. And they also like the freedom to farm. There's good money out of it. There's another show in town in terms of that side of things. So I think that and the fact that you'll have a local support office will be really important selling points for farmers. So yeah, I think that's as far as it goes. And to build, hopefully there's, within Acres, there's the opportunity to be creative with certain actions which can help to engage people more. And I think that's what's missing in a lot of the previous schemes.
Brilliant. Okay, we're going to have to press on. Sorry, would you grab my coffee, okay, Desmond? Excellent. Thank you very much, Brendan.